Hello, I am Susan Allen, National President and CEO of the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce Education Foundation. As a child growing up in Hong Kong, my father often told us, 6 kids, over family dinner, about the chopstick story. He said, a single chopstick is easily broken, but a bundle of chopsticks is strong and hard to break. And that's what we aim for today and in the future, to become that strong bundle of chopsticks, because we'll be united, we can meet challenges and come out stronger than ever. Welcome to day one of US PAC's Celebration Business Plus Procurement Conference. This year's theme, Together, Tomorrow, celebrates the power of diversity and unity as we turn the corner from the uncommon and unprecedented challenges of the past year. We also look to the future, a new and promising one, where inclusion and allyship will bring alive opportunity and prosperity for all of us. We're honored that our Chamber Leadership Alliance is here to open our conference with this solidarity event. It's the country's 4 most established and effective national minority and diverse chambers of commerce for Asian, Black, Hispanic, and LGBT communities that formed this alliance in 2010 with support from Wells Fargo. They are, in the order of founding, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce, the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, and the U.S. Black Chambers. Since then, our leaders and members have come together 45 times to learn to build and grow sustainable chambers. And we have trained over 700 minority and diverse chamber leaders who then returned to their community to foster business success among our members. And so here we are today for 3 days of intensive result-oriented programs and extensive networking. Our impressive program lineup of subject matter experts, industry leaders, disruptors, and innovators will not disappoint. Together, we will open the doors to opportunities, innovative ideas, and products that will lead to success. Let us remember that growth will not come by chance, but by working as one, like the bundle of chopsticks, united by our aspirations with mutually beneficial results. We've prepared a great feast of business development events for you. Please enjoy them. To all our supporters and sponsors, this conference is successful in part because of you. Thank you. To our participants, thank you for tuning in. And now, please meet Dr. Wayne Frederick, President, Howard University, the top historically Black college and university in the United States, and a 4-year partner of ours in supply chain management programs that we are extremely proud of. Dr. and President Frederick, please join us.
Thank you, Suzanne. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm pleased to join the US PAC 2021 Celebration Annual Business Conference. I applaud your National President and CEO, Suzanne O'Allen, for her leadership that enables Asian, minority, and diverse Americans in business nationwide to access business opportunities in corporations, government, and large nonprofits. This is also a program that celebrates Americans of all backgrounds. And I'm honored to stand with you today, representing Howard University, a historically Black college and university, which has had a 4-year relationship with US PAC. Congratulations to the Chamber Leadership Alliance for your 10-year collaboration that has continued to train over 700 local and state chambers and affiliates across the country on leadership, governance, and programming to build sustainable nonprofit organizations. In recent years, the demands of a changing academic, business, and political environment has created unique opportunities in academia and industries. Our partnership with US PAC has been an important vehicle for our business school students to gain valuable experience and exposure in the real world, better preparing them to become contributors to the economy and society. It's important to note that you are supported by some of the best corporations, from Amazon to Wells Fargo, Nationwide, T-Mobile, Train Technologies, Facebook, Charter Communications, and so many more, as well as leading Asian American businesses like Amcos and Pyramid Consulting. Your time here today makes a difference tomorrow. On behalf of Howard University, we thank US PAC for our 4 years of partnership in providing excellent services to our communities. We look forward to meeting many of you at this conference, and once again, congratulations to the Chamber Leadership Alliance for 10 years of inclusion and allyship. You're models for so many of us to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Frederick, for your kind words. Our community appreciates you and Howard University for the support in solidarity. And now I proudly introduce my colleague executives of the Chamber Leadership Alliance from the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the U.S. Black Chambers, and the U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. First, please meet the President and CEO, U.S. Black Chambers, Ron Busby.
Good day. My name is Ron Busby, and I'm the President and CEO of the U.S. Black Chambers, Inc., headquartered here in Washington, D.C., where we represent 149 Black Chambers of Commerce across the country. In today's environment, it seems that hate is a prevailing issue. And when one of our communities are being attacked, all of our communities are being attacked. And so together we stand in solidarity to say enough is enough. The U.S. Black Chamber, the U.S. Hispanic Chamber, the U.S. Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce, the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce all stand together in solidarity to say that we will aggressively work towards acceptance, allyship, and activism to stop the hate. I'd like to now take this opportunity to turn it over to my good friend, Ramiro Cavasso of the U.S. Hispanic Chamber. Thank you for your participation today.
On June 12, 2016, a man opened fire, killing 49 people and injuring another 53 in Orlando, Florida, at the Pulse nightclub. It was Latino night that evening. More than 80% of the victims were Hispanic or Latino or considered themselves members of the LGBTQ community. In August of 2019, a man opened fire and a mass shooting occurred at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, with other innocent bystanders. More than 23 people were killed and an additional 22 injured that day. This was a shocker that took our community by complete surprise. And it was clearly a surprise because the victims were all Hispanic. On Sunday, March 21st, 2021, Lorenzo Perez, a local entrepreneur, a burrito stand vendor operating out of a food truck in Fresno, California, was murdered randomly. He was shot in the head in broad daylight. These three examples of discrimination and hate crimes are completely unacceptable in this country and have become commonplace throughout America. And it's time to stop. My name is Ramiro Cavazos, and I am the President and CEO of the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And I'm here today to ask you and affirm that we all proudly stand alongside our National Chamber Leadership Alliance partners in the Asian, Black, and LGBTQ community to combat all forms of discrimination. Discrimination is bad for business, and it is something that today we need to join forces to stop the hate. We need to do it together, and we need to stand up together to fight these types of hate crimes. Our economy needs your help. Our small businesses, especially minority businesses, are no longer willing to accept the status quo. Please join us.
Hey, thank you, Ramiro. Appreciate you, your partnership, and everything you do to help all of our communities be better. I am Justin Nelson. I'm the co-founder and president at the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, NGLCC. I use he, him pronouns, and I am proud to be a part of the Chamber Leadership Alliance. In terms of hate crimes against the LGBT community, we make up about 17% of those that are reported. And last year alone, we had over 44 trans murders, most of them women of color. It was the deadliest year on record. So far this year, we're already at 30. This is an epidemic that must stop, and we need our communities to work together to ensure that violence and discrimination against any of us is not acceptable. Over the past year, our nation has seen a rise in class, racial, ethnic, and age divisions. The escalation of hate crimes against our communities is out of hand. The time is now for us to stand as one unified community, to demand action, and declare together that discrimination, bigotry, and violence against any fellow human being is wrong and will not be tolerated. We are proud to stand with members that represent Black, AAPI, African American, Hispanic communities, and many others. Solidarity is a recognition that we are all in this together, and it's a commitment to strengthen community and promote a just society. The Chamber Leadership Alliance will use the four chambers' commitment to diversity, equality, equity, and education to increase opportunities for diverse state and local Chamber of Commerce organizations by educating and developing leaders to support America's growing diverse entrepreneurs. Having said that, we at the Chamber Leadership Alliance would formally like to announce that the CLA will conduct a three-part action series on acceptance, allyship, and activism to continue this solidarity effort. Subject matter experts with strong DEI backgrounds will conduct a deep dive into these three series. Acceptance, talking about discrimination, exclusion, and racism faced by our communities, and addressing issues of intersectionality that create different modes of discrimination as well as privilege. Allyship, discussing an anti-oppression and allyship, how to work for social justice as an ally. We can all be allies to one another and to other communities. Activism, work on how to actively support our diverse communities, workshops on different forms of activism, and learn to create a campaign to take direct action and create change in your communities. This is a transformative training that promotes the growth of certified minority-owned, women-owned, LGBT-owned, veteran-owned, disability-owned, and other marginalized communities and our small businesses. We are the backbone of the country's economy and a vibrant part of the small business engine that makes this economy run. The time is now to lean in to solidarity and ensure that when there's an attack against one of us, it is an attack against all of us. Thank you very much and enjoy the program.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Akriti Rana. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the program manager of the Chamber Leadership Alliance, and today I'd like to welcome you all to the Chamber Leadership Alliance Solidarity Program. Today's panel discussion is on solidarity and leadership. Affiliate chamber leaders from the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce, the US Black Chambers, Inc., the United States Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, and the US Pan-Asian American Chamber of Commerce will discuss best practices, struggles, and challenges they have experienced in the light of growing discourse around violence and hate against diverse communities. We invite you all to be a part of this conversation around the importance of expressing solidarity amongst minority communities and inclusive leadership. Now, I'd like to welcome our moderator, Mr. Eric Toda. Eric is a marketing executive, angel investor, and nonprofit board member. He is currently the global head of social at Facebook. He has previously held marketing leadership roles at Gap Inc., Airbnb, Snapchat, and Nike. Eric is also an advisor to many disruptive startups like Yumi, Wardrobe, Upaway, Philo, and many others. Eric also sits on the board of directors for Reimagine and Leading Asian American to Unite for Change launch, and the Advisory Council for the Asian American Foundation, TAF. Most recently, Eric has been a leading voice for the Stop Asian Hate movement in the business world by launching his advocacy in Adweek earlier this year, calling out the marketing and advertising industry not just to care, but to act. And his advocacy has continued for the AAPI community since. Eric, welcome.
No, thank you for having me. And it's quite an honor to be on the virtual stage with such prominent members of each and every single one of these communities. I will tell you that in the midst of a larger cultural awakening that we're in right now, the mere fact that we are pushing for solidarity, the mere fact that we are pushing for, and continue to push for allyship and define that and redefine that as more and more communities come to life, brings me optimism, not just as a leader in the marketing and advertising industry, but as a father of two young children that hopefully grow up in a world that we are pushing forward towards. And so, again, it's a great honor. And again, thank you for having me. I wanted to take this time now to introduce our esteemed panelists, and I will let them introduce themselves one by one, just who you are, what you represent, and what you hope to come from this conversation. And so I just want to introduce my first panelist, Kelly Parkin.
Thanks, Eric. I'm glad to be here today. I think this is such an important conversation. I am the executive director of the Pride Chamber Orlando. We're the LGBT and ally business association for all of Central Florida, and an affiliate chamber of the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce.
Well, nice to have you, Kelly, and it's an honor to be on the stage with you. Vita Jeffrey.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm excited to be here with you. I am the founder of the Heartland St. Louis Black Chamber of Commerce. Our chamber is a chamber that started after the unrest in Ferguson, Missouri. And I also have the privilege of sitting on the board for the U.S. Black Chambers, Inc. nationally. And this is a conversation that I'm interested on our local and regional levels. And I'm absolutely interested in seeing how we can push this conversation forward on larger scale. So I'm excited to be here today.
No, thank you for joining. And John Pacheco.
Thanks, Eric. This again is John Pacheco, and I'm president of the Latino Chamber of Commerce of Minnesota. I've been at this for about 4 years now. I'm also the board member of the Latino Economic Development Center, the Governor's Workforce Task Force Board, and a number of other smaller nonprofit boards where I sit either in advisory or board member capacity.
Thank you for being here, John. And Sheetal Desai. Did I get that right?
Yes. I am currently the president of the Southeast chapter of USPAC, which is the U.S. Pan Asian American Chamber of Commerce, which is an affiliate of the National Chamber. I'm very excited to be here with the esteemed panel, and I look forward to the discussion today.
Thank you for being here. Okay, so let's get into the conversation. Obviously, this is a panel about solidarity. It's for us to really discuss the challenges and really provide advice and best practices in DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as how acceptable allyship and activism, help enable you as chamber leaders to bring positive impact to the minority and diverse owned small businesses that you serve individually and within your communities. So I think each of you have experienced a level of violence and tragedy in your respective communities, both locally and broadly, as diverse community leaders, whether it be the Pulse nightclub in Orlando, George Floyd in Minneapolis, Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Ahmaud Arbery, who's going for a run in his Georgia neighborhood, the El Paso Walmart massacre. It's really tough to read all these, actually. and the recent light shed on the Asian American Pacific Islander violence and discrimination, starting with the Atlanta spa shooting, and many, like honestly, too many more. Can we each talk about how each of these events has impacted your local community and you as leaders, but also what we can collectively do to acknowledge these obviously heinous acts of hatred, so we can help cease them to exist? Would like to hear from each of you on how it's truly impacted you, and what you're doing to establish at least some level of stopping these attacks and hatred in our communities. Feel free to jump in, anybody. Don't be shy now.
I'll start. For St. Louis, the event that was an awakening for us was Ferguson, which happened August 9th of 2014. And while the unrest of Ferguson for us kicked off events all around the world, it was an event for us that peeled back the onion of the layers of racism that could be traced back for decades in our community. And it exposed the wounds that we have been dealing with, the hatred, the disparities, the discrimination that was eroding our foundations, that was eroding our structure. And so for us, it caused economic downturns, making it next to impossible for us to right the ship as things were going. Right now, even as we are looking forward towards the next, we have roughly about 1,164 days. They had to figure that out before the 10th anniversary of Ferguson. We are still trying to figure out how to right the conversations, the things that continue to keep us divided. We found that in our community, all of these things that you mentioned in asking this, they only continue to shine a light for us on how much we were not united. After 5 o'clock, our communities ceased to exist in any shape, form, or fashion of unifying entities. And so we see that the collective way that we have to work together for hatred to cease to exist is to be intentional about how we're collaboratively working together. We've got to make time for one another after 5 o'clock. We've got to intentionally work on projects that are building up all our communities, all of our economics. We have to become more inclusive intentionally, and dealing with taking away from the misconceptions that exist about one another, so that we can begin to start building deeper relationships and deeper understandings of who we actually are. And those are things that we can start by taking steps to do today. So.
No, I love that. And to be honest with you, it's a stark reminder that Ferguson was in 2014, and there were so many more acts of violence even prior to Ferguson. Ferguson was more of a bubbling up. And when I look at the larger cultural conversation around what's happening in our society at large, we are in the middle, very much so, in the middle of a larger cultural awakening in which we are actively questioning the truths that we've been told, the stereotypes that we've been given, the biases that we've been subjected to. And hopefully we now have an intersectionality between not just questioning those truths, but actively looking to evolve them. And so I do think you're right, Vida. I do think you're right that we have to do more, not just for our own communities, but extend a hand to the other communities, whether it be the Latinx community, the LGBTQ community, the Asian American community, to say, we are in this cultural awakening together. And I truly do believe, and I've said this many times, I truly do believe as we look 5-10 years down the road and look back on this moment that we're in, whether it be a 10-year period or a 12-year period, whatever it will be, and as we pick up more communities, like the Jewish community, which is obviously under attack right now, we will look back on this and potentially liken it to the 1960s, which was more federally driven, whereas this is more culturally and societal driven. We are actively questioning that. So thank you so much for that answer. But I agree with you. It has to be collaborative. We have to see past the insularity of our own communities to extend and build more bridges there.
Well, this is John, and I could just start out by saying, just restating what Vida already spoke to, and that's the history there. Obviously, what brings us together in Minnesota right now, and the allyship that we've been forging, has been around the killing of George Floyd, which became local, then international. And one thing you may not know is that Minnesota has the largest Hmong population in the United States, has the largest Somali population in the United States, has a large indigenous population, it's a large Latino population. So it is a spot where people wouldn't assume that or know that, and bringing that together is more important. I'd like to thank the conveners of this meeting, because I'm looking forward to learn some more myself, but also I think never before has the need to come together and to become a full collaborative in this effort to address the systematic changes. It's more of a need now than it ever has been before. When we watched the horrifying killing of George Floyd, it touched everybody. And if you saw the protesters around Minnesota, it had every color, race, all in there. And unfortunately, we're still facing a lot of violence in Minnesota, like a lot of major cities right now. But at this point, it brought a lot of people together. And although I will tell you, we did get a guilty verdict, and that's important. But I would also tell you the jury's still out on what happened after that. The jury's still out on what's happening systematically. The U.S., Congress is still debating and not moving on a George Floyd bill. In Minnesota, right now, we're going to special session on a budget, but they have not addressed it. They have not addressed the safety of the police reform bill that's on the table. So while we're getting together and while we're advocating, you have to remember the work isn't done. We have an important role, and that we together have to look at where this change happens and how we can sustain it. Otherwise, 10 years from now, we'll be reminding other people of it and come up and say, well, what did you do? I think right now is our opportunity. Right now, we're front and center, and it's our turn to start making some real change. And our allyship is never more important than right now.
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, John. Our allyship has never been more important than it is now, as multiple communities, many communities are now coming together, to fight for equality, to fight for inclusivity. I look at the Pulse nightclub shooting that happened around 5 years ago, and I do think, and when I look at the LGBTQ community, you represent every walk of life. You represent all the minority communities that are happening right now. And so, Kelly, I would love to know from you, the common denominator and what's woven through many of these communities is the LGBTQ community, and you represent a large population there. And so I would love to know, as we enter into Pride Month, happy Pride. What has been, how is the community treating this a little bit differently, as we are obviously in this larger cultural awakening that has picked up way more communities, since 2016?
Well, we are coming up on the 5-year mark of Pulse on the 12th of this month. So it's a bittersweet month as we celebrate Pride, the month of June, but the first 2 weeks now for the last 5 years. And I'm sure moving forward always we'll be remembering and doing our best to memorialize, and it is the LGBT community that was targeted, but it was also the Latinx community. I mean, it was mothers, it was children, it's just, it affected everyone. And I like to focus on the positive that came out of it, because it's such a horrible thing that I still struggle to talk about it in general. But I like to focus on the unexpected and positive outcome that it connected us as an entire community and with the rest of the world. But here locally, we realized at that time that we were not connected. We didn't communicate very well with each other. So now, out of that tragedy, we have the One Orlando Alliance, which is a coalition of all local nonprofits in the area that have either an LGBT focus or an LGBT programming. And I've lost count, but there's over 40 nonprofits that are involved in that. And we meet quarterly and do projects together. And right now we're really trying to work on making sure that all of our organizations are, have anti-racism programs in place. But like I say, I struggle to talk about it beyond that, because I watched some in our community right after polls happened. I watched people kind of swoop in and attempt to own or gain the tragedy, or gain from the tragedy, which was really unfortunate. But I think we all see that in various aspects of what we do, and it's just a good reminder for us to, I guess what it taught me is that I don't need to be the first to speak. I don't need to be the largest voice, but it is important to use my voice when when I can't. So how do we stop the devastating tragedies from happening? I think that's a loaded question. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how we stop them completely, but I know that we must continue our work. We're all doing a lot of the same things. We're trying for the same thing. We want full equality, equity, inclusion. We want people to embrace diversity. And so we have to continue that work. We have to use our voices. We got to work together, because our voices are so much stronger when we're united. I just think that we have to continue to bring that understanding and awareness. And I think we have to vote. So for those of you listening, vote. And if you're interested in running for office, you should do that. Here's your push.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Kelly. I will say this is a marathon, right? And there are more and more people joining the marathon, and you don't have to be the loudest voice. You don't have to be the first voice, like you said, but you have to be a consistent voice. And as long as you're a consistent voice, continue to fight for this, continue to outlast those who have used this to gain individually, then we will make that progress. And as I look at as now we've transitioned into Happy Pride, we just exited from Asian Pacific Heritage Month. And Sheetal, I would love to know from you, how do we continue to push us forward, not just as an Asian American community, but with the nuances within ourselves, whether that be East Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian? How do we continue to push ourselves forward now that the month is gone? How do we treat this more like a movement than a moment, and seek to continue to uplift all these communities that are represented here, but more that come down the line?
Yeah, I think, like Kelly said earlier, that the unfortunate event of the Atlanta spa shootings kind of opened some eyes up, and it, for a long time, the Asian American community wasn't really looked at as a minority group that had been discriminated against, possibly because of cultural differences where people don't speak up, or there's a lot of nuances, within our community as to why things don't come to light. But I think the good that came out of it was it got put on the national stage. Like, hey, this is a problem here too. It's not just one community or the other. It's every community gets attacked. And I think that we realize that an attack on any community is really an attack on all of us. And as long as the intolerance continues against any community, it could happen to any of us at any time. This concept of intolerance is what I think all of us are fighting against. It's probably rooted in ignorance to a certain degree. And so I know there is some effort on US PAC's initiatives to start young, start at the school age level, to start educating kids and open their minds up to all the different communities that do exist and coexist. I know I have young kids and they don't really see the differences, which is fantastic. That's how it should be. They just look at, okay, I got 20 kids in my class, and we have a good time. Like, they don't really see the differences that maybe we grew up with the biases that we grew up with, or, the indoctrinations that we grew up in school or in society or whatever. So they have a much purer view of the world. And that's kind of where we need to push, so that when this new generation grows up, they take people for who they are, not prejudice based on, what they look like or what their affiliations are or what they believe in. It's just, they're human beings. We're all in the same race, the human race, and to, the education, I think, is going to be the key to improving this. We can't always react, like a quick reaction to something that happened, like the Atlanta shootings, or the Ferguson, or any of these tragic events. It can't just be a knee-jerk reaction every time, but we have to kind of start at the source and work our way up so that we're not constantly reacting or having to react.
No, absolutely. And thank you, Sheetal. I look at you as chamber affiliates across this country as really sitting at the heartbeat of our communities. Each and every single one of you are at the heartbeat of our communities. And so I would love to know more from, specifically from you, Vita. How do we create more intersectional engagement and promote full economic inclusion as the chambers do sit at the heart of every single one of these communities?
I think that's a great question. I think chamber affiliates can promote the efforts of one another, being mindful and inclusive when we're organizing panel discussions. We can involve one another in solving community problems. All of us sit at the helm of, as you say, having our pulse on what's happening for businesses. And we need to be inclusive in them in the solution. We need to unify our efforts in how we're working on issues collectively, be intentional in finding ways or opportunities for us to speak truth to power together. If it happens in one community, it affects all of our communities. And so we have to deal with our political leaders, we have to deal with our corporate leaders, and we have to draw attention to the importance of the businesses that we represent and how it affects our bottom line economically, collectively, and allow that to be our unified voice.
Absolutely. John, any thoughts there on how we can continue to inspire or create more catalyzing functions, to create more intersectional engagement and promote full economic inclusion?
Sure, and I think that's a primary responsibility of a chamber of commerce, is to really work with the particularly small businesses, work with the small business to make sure they're available and able to get this growth that we're expecting to get. I mean, just yesterday on the news, President Biden announced that his focus of the Small Business Administration will be on small business. And that's where the majority of our constituents come from, is this small business. And so I think we need to be prepared and help our businesses be prepared. And I'll give you an example, is that there is more and more money being put out there. And years ago, we called it either affirmative action, and it still may be there, or set aside. And those programs were built to gain some traction around small business or individuals being involved in the economy. And slowly they kind of became less vogue or out of favor, and it's less there. But today it's being talked about, and where do we land? In Minnesota, we have $2.1 billion in products and services that the state government contracts for. And I checked, and there's a little under 9,000 businesses that are registered Latino owned. And that's self-identification, so that's low. Of that, our State Department had 84 Latino businesses registered as a minority women business enterprise. That doesn't even guarantee they have a contract. And so we need to prepare these small businesses, prepare the government and how to work with these small businesses, take the resources that are out there and address that. The University of Minnesota does 400 million. And so I think that there's a focus there that we need to have and take the resources that are out there and really build on what the value could be. And there's a lot of things we can do. I'll give you one other example and then I'll step back. But the Department of Transportation on an annual basis will spend so much on cutting these corners for the sidewalks and the concrete work. What they did about 2 years ago now is they bundled them into only 10, 20, 30. And that allowed a smaller business to have access to those kind of contracts while they build the relationship with the state as well as their own business. And what I hear more and more is, John, I can do the work. I don't have the back of the house office right now. I'm out here doing the work and I need some assistance. And I think more and more as we look at how the state, quote unquote, builds it better, which is the constant refrain these days. How do we not only rebuild, but how do we build it better? I think the chambers are at the forefront of helping people do that and help government actually help us as well. I know that's the focus of Ramiro Cavazos, which is the president of U.S. Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. And we, as an affiliate, will be working with them quite often. I'll give you one other example, though, of what can be done. And that is to look at the government and other corporations and what they are doing today. And there's little victories. Hennepin County is our largest county. They were hiring the intake workers and their social programs, or social service programs. They had to have a BA or above. And what they were getting was people with master's degrees. And the master's degrees come in the county because they can move up. And so they wouldn't stay long, they'd be moving on and someone else would come in. But they realized someone to do an intake job, they don't need a 4-year degree. They can do that with 2-year certificate. Now they get employees that love the job, that this is the kind of job that they have empathy. They've been in line before, they know that. And so it's a different way to look at things. And so now they're getting more people, they're staying. There's these little things that we can do to help small businesses and help our employees get access to the programs that are out there, and that better serve and have this fit that they're built around.
Thank you for that, John. And you're right. I think there are little things that we could do. And I truly believe it comes down to leadership. It comes down to leadership and a push for inclusivity and equity coming from the leadership level. All of you, every single one of you represent that. Every single one of you don't just represent the needs of, one community versus another, but really the needs of all communities that you do serve. And I think as you're talking, John, again, you're not just serving the Latino community, you're serving the many other communities, surrounding you. And so I do think that there are small things, tangible things, tactical things that you could do to support the community to increase economic inclusion. But I do believe that it comes down to leadership, and all of you certainly represent that. So I'd love to know from you, Kelly, what does it mean to you to be an inclusive and equity focused leader?
That's such a big question. Well, I think it's, to use probably a worn out phrase, I think it's leading by example. I think we have to be that person that we want other people to be as well. So that means seeking perspectives, other perspectives. It means asking questions to learn. So many people, I'm sure you all know this, when someone else is talking, we're listening and we're preparing what we're going to say next. And we have to stop that. Yeah, I think that that's really important part of our job. And I think that a lot of diverse chamber leaders do this. It's what I see, that we have to listen with understanding and that intent to understand what's going on. So even if that means we have to take a pause after someone speaks and it's our turn, we have to collect our thoughts before we respond. That's great, because we shouldn't be collecting our thoughts while that other person is talking. That's how we're going to learn from them. So I also think that as a leader, and this kind of falls into what your previous question was, but what can we be doing? As chamber leaders, we're in a lot of rooms where things happen. We are, in rooms with decision makers. And so I think it's our duty to look around and see who's missing. I think that we need to speak up and say, hey, we're missing so-and-so, or we're missing this organization. So let's invite them. And I have never run into any resistance in doing that. And I've also been invited to tables that I wasn't at because someone said, hey, we're missing the Pride Chamber. So I think that that's a really important part of what we do, and something that we can easily implement moving forward if we're not already doing it.
No, absolutely. And I mean, the thing is, it is a big question to be asked, right? But I will say that for those that will watch this, you have no idea the level at which you will inspire. You have no idea the level at which you will encourage maybe someone on the border to run for office, because you sit in that chair. And so it's a big question, but it's one that needs to be asked, because again, this conversation wouldn't have happened 15 years ago. This conversation probably wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, to be quite honest with you. But that's part of this awakening that we're in. And so the mere fact that you can talk about why you're doing this, you could talk about what it means to be a leader, and think more insular in not just, well, this is what I do for a career, but rather this is who I do it for. That's what I think is an important message. And so, Sheetal, I'd love to learn from you. Again, as the Asian American community is now finding its voice and now having a tremendous amount of visibility to the issues that have traditionally plagued our community, I'd love to know from you, especially for the Asian American folks that are watching this, what does it mean to you to be a leader that is focused on inclusivity and equity?
I think we're in a unique position. All of us, we're in positions of leadership, like Kelly said, and I think Vita said, we're in places where there's leaders, there's decisions being made. It's our opportunity to speak up. And I think we're also in a unique time in that all of our communities have made headways. I'm not saying it's enough, but we have made some headways in the last several decades. And so there are a lot of people that are in positions of power that we can piggyback on. And it's identifying those folks and calling them out and saying, hey, come help our cause, because you're now in a place where you're an influencer. You have connections, you have the ability to teach others, to lift them up on your shoulders and say, hey, I did it, so can you. And so what I found in the last, several months with the, again, Atlanta, and then especially the last month, the Asian Heritage Month, is that there's a lot of people that are highlighted that I didn't even know were there. And I'm in the community and I'm a leader and I didn't know them. And so, let's bring out the people that have succeeded in our communities, and ask them, hey, why don't you be mentors for our organizations? Why don't you help our folks, especially in the business community? You've obviously learned the ropes on how to do government contracts. So, hey, can you teach a few other people to, they're not going to be competing with you, but help them. And I think the people who are successful have no problem giving back. I've seen that they're more than willing to give back to the communities that they're a part of and others. And sometimes it's just nobody ever asks them. And so when you approach them, they're more than willing to act as mentors, to guide, to speak, to, just engage with us. And I think we can all help each other, cross community wise too. There's no issue with that. And, it's just, I think finding these people that are already successful, good leaders succeed, but then they also know how to uplift. And those are the people we need to find, identify, and bring them on.
No, I 100% agree. And I think it actually leads me to my next question. I do think it isn't just about speaking for the community. It's about and showing other people, oh, that's the door I cross to do what I do, but instead hold that door open. Hold that door open from them. It's a respectful thing to do. My mama taught me that. But holding that door open, again, is what makes good leaders incredible leaders. And, one thing that stood out to me, at least, as I'm looking through all your bios and as, I'm learning more about you and learning more about your communities, Vita, I look at your bio, and the first thing that is literally the first sentence is you have spent your life fighting for the rights of others, not just for your own community, but for other people, and other minority communities. And I do think that is a tremendous act of allyship, especially in a time that everybody says ally. No one really knows what it means, but it's about actions. And I do think when I look at that sentence, that you've spent your life fighting for others, I'd love to learn from you. What do you do to promote mutual respect, understanding, and fairness when we conduct our, not just daily lives and our personal lives, but in business? I think business and government and politics and policy and legislation is such a important and impactful way that we can, again, include equality, inclusivity. Kelly spoke about it before, being able to point out what groups aren't in the room. So I'd love to learn from you, Vita. Again, what do you believe are the most important things to do as a leader to promote mutual respect and understanding and fairness?
Absolutely. I think that means using my voice. As an ally, I've been intentional about promoting opportunities for uniting understandings of the hurts that have been exacted against other communities. So I can promote opportunities for us to unite business owners of different backgrounds. I can promote programming to unite more diverse positioning of thought, of concepts, of experiences. What I look at for me, I'm very proud of who I am, but I've over the years had to explain to people that I can be proud of who I am and who I represent without being anti anybody, and letting my efforts, my actions, and my words and outcomes reflect the same. So that means I'm passionate about the work that I support, the needs of the community. As you mentioned, holding the door open, not just for me or those that fit in my community, but for those who need access and opportunity. That means not disparaging or sitting complicit as I see other organizations being disparaged against, creating opportunities for, I've said this several times, and I guess this is one of the intentionality of focus that I'm looking at is, how do we begin to create annual or semi-annual events in business for us to unite our efforts and bring our voices together? How can we be intentional about the work that we're doing, the bridges that we are building, the mentoring opportunities, as was mentioned, across different communities, different experiences? It means us being able to promote narratives or speak intentionally about others and not just telling our own story. I'm learning that if we begin to recognize the hurt that each of us are experiencing and we each share in that storytelling, we begin to actually chip away at the issues that have been committed over the years and cause so much hurt. Oftentimes, what I'm learning is communities sit in isolation, feeling like nobody else sees us, or those that would seek to keep us divided cause us to look at one another and keep the division to where we've witnessed, if every city's different, but we've witnessed experiences of, well, at least we're not like them. As long as, you know, we're not looked upon as that individual group of people, then we're going to be okay. And I would say that that's a case of letting the oppressor help us to keep the oppressed down. And even by using that word, you can define it however you would, but anything that separates us as cultures and communities is oppressing the unification of us and how we collectively work together. So as an ally, I can use my voice to lift up my community and other communities by talking about the intentionality of us coming together and working collectively, and then putting pen to paper, setting dates down and saying, in June and January, we'll have this event that'll be an all collective event where we're bringing together our businesses so that we can have mentors together. We can have opportunities together. We can go after RFPs together and see how we can take small businesses and help them grow by building capacity and opportunity as the leaders that we're supposed to be. So.
Fantastic. And I totally agree. It is about collectively holding hands and making sure that one, we grapple with the uncomfortable truth that many of our communities have been more insular and been more isolated, right? I do think that time is changing. Like, we are certainly in that evolutionary period. And I would look at the LGBTQ community as one of those communities that obviously has historically transcended that isolation and held hands with many communities in pain. And so I would love to know from you, Kelly, again, what do you and the Chamber do to promote mutual respect, understanding, and fairness?
Well, before I go on, I want to just comment on Vita's points, because I think that I'm really glad that you mentioned this idea of keeping us divided and how we really have to fight that. Because when we're all united as diverse groups, we're no longer in the minority. And,
exactly.
And
yep.
People are there are some people who are very afraid of that. So I'm glad you mentioned that, Vida, and I think it's something we all need to remember. So Eric, as you said earlier, you know, the LGBT community intersects with all of the other diverse communities. And so I really enjoy that part of my work, that when I'm out there telling people you need to use diverse suppliers, you need to use LGBT suppliers, I'm also saying you need to use minority or you know, Black owned businesses, Hispanic owned businesses, veteran owned businesses, people with disabilities who own businesses, you know, there's women owned businesses, there's so many. And so it's nice that we get to do that. And I see the other chambers, the other diverse chambers in town also doing that and helping to promote us. So I think that that's really important as an ally. And I think it's, you know, we talk a lot about allyship. I think that it's a big educational process, because like you said, not everybody knows what it means. And so it's important to tell people allyship should be part of everything that we do. It needs to be part of who we are, whether other people see it or not. It does not require an audience or getting praise. It shouldn't require that. That being an ally is not about the ally. You know, it's about giving opportunity to others. And so we absolutely should be loud and visible, and we need to recognize when it's time to take a step back and you know, give that platform to the other voices.
I know we're out of time, but Sheetal, Vida, John, and Kelly, thank you so much. It was an absolute honor to have this conversation. I learned so much, and thank you for helping build a better world for my kids and our kids.
Eric, thank you so much for moderating today's panel discussion. And thank you, panelists, for sharing your insightful view on today's topic on leadership and solidarity. This is just the start of the conversation. CLA looks forward to continuing this important conversation through our three-part action series in acceptance, allyship, and activism, and continue the CLA solidarity effort in months to come. Thank you all.